It is Midday Live. Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Drew. Our number is 800-222-5222. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk about California court reversing the ruling against assisted suicide. But right now, we're going to go out to our friend and contributor to the Washington Examiner, Ryan Girdusky. Ryan.
Yeah, speaking of assisted suicide, here's Ryan Girdusky.
Well, maybe the real association should be more closer to the name Michael Cohen than Ryan Girdusky.
Yeah. Right. Well, right now, yeah. It's not looking very good for Michael Cohen.
What's going on there? What do we make of all this? And by the way, let me just frame this by saying I was telling Lauren I was watching the A&E special, The Clinton Affair, about the Monica Lewinsky situation.
Yes, I watched it too.
Is it not uncanny how similar these circumstances are? I mean, it's uncanny.
I've always said that Clinton's presidency and Trump's presidencies mirrored each other a lot. I mean, it's very, very similar. They both received a plurality of the vote, not a majority. They both were scandal-ridden. A lot in common.
I was literally thinking to myself, the only difference is Clinton had the press with him, except for this far-right group, and Trump has the press in a frenzy.
Well, also, Clinton had a lot of loyal people around him, and Trump has a bunch of backstabbers and bloodsuckers and hangers-oners that he's employed around him, and an idiot son-in-law named Jared Kushner. So that's who Trump has.
Well, wait a minute. He was just knighted. He was knighted in Mexico, or whatever that was. Yeah.
Knighted in Mexico. What kind of honor is that? I'd rather be a Kentucky colonel than be knighted
How dare
in Mexico.
you?
That's why we don't have a wall today, because Jared had to get knighted in Mexico. So, you know, illegal immigration is going to hit a decade-long high next year. They're projecting 600,000 illegals will make it to America 2 years after Trump got into presidency. But Jared got knighted in Mexico, and we moved an embassy for him. So long live President Jared Kushner. I didn't realize that's what we voted for.
Do you think there's going to be much of this Cohen thing? I kind of feel like it's going to flare up today and just be gone tomorrow.
Here's the problem, and this is about the Russia investigation. No one can follow it. Because it doesn't really involve collusion. It doesn't involve Donald Trump, honestly, collusion. Michael Cohen's big lie was that he was working on building a Trump Tower in Moscow, but didn't get it done and chose not to do it. But he lied that he said that he didn't plan on doing it. It makes no sense. And also, by the way, Trump still bombed Russians. I mean, we still have sanctions on Russia. It wasn't like Trump is lifting all these sanctions on Russia and giving away everything to Russia so he can build Trump hotels. He's probably the harshest president towards Russia since Reagan. So it makes no sense. I think that's just a news headline so that Rachel Maddow can have a whole hour-long thing about, much to do about it. I mean, really, honestly, it affects no one's lives.
It reminds me of Whitewater, Ryan. It really reminds me of the Whitewater scandal. That's one of the correlates I thought was very clear.
And the Clintons still got away with that. So it just, I don't know. I just, in a 24 hours news cycle where we hear that Americans' life expectancy is declining for the second time ever, that illegal aliens are crossing the border like no one's business, where jobs being laid over in Ohio, I really couldn't care less if they gave him the chair. Like I just couldn't. And to make matters from bad to worse, is this, and my article mentions this, is this new hire that the Secretary Mike Pompeo had. Mike Pompeo hired this woman named Mary Kissel to be his top advisor. At the
a never-Trumper.
Not even a never-Trumper. No, there's a lot of people who didn't like Trump for the way he speaks and for all his gold fixtures and for being so for crass. I get that. Mary Kissel said that he was a threat to the human race. Mary Kissel said that his beliefs were horrible. That Jeb Bush was the thought center about immigration. Jeb Bush was the logical candidate in the 2016 race. She wasn't just a never-Trumper. She was everything wrong about the Wall Street Journal and about the elite class. She had not only no business being an advisor to the Secretary of State, she has no business being paid to speak about politics. She's wrong so often. And that's just not Mary Kissel. She's not the only one. That is nearly the entire Trump administration. It is full with swamp creatures, Bush people, neocons, everyone who hated him.
He drained the swamp and he brought it into the White House. The creature of the Black Lagoon in every office. There is probably, you could probably count on your hands and toes how many people there who work in his administration actually voted for him. It is mind-boggling. So the one thing that Clinton had that, that Trump doesn't have is Clinton at least had Stephanopoulos and all these other people who are actually going to bat and fighting for him. Trump has a bunch of people who are waiting for him to, leave office so they can get Mike Pence in office and get any job that they want.
Let me push back a little bit and say, how do we know it's not a band of rivals? Like, we applauded Abraham Lincoln for bringing in all the people that ran against him for the presidency and really hated him in his campaign, and they brought him into his cabinet. Who's
the pro-Trump person?
Well, by the way,
it was Jeff Sessions.
Pompeo, probably.
It was, exactly. It was Jeff Sessions. So now who's the pro-Trump person?
Pompeo, right?
What?
Pompeo.
G. Whittaker's
Pompeo,
over at
who's
State.
the higher never-Trumpers? No, but this is Pompeo's second never-Trumper that he brought in. The person who's in charge of Syria policy was a never-Trumper, signed a letter telling Republicans to vote for Hillary over Trump, saying that Trump is so bad on foreign policy, gets in, now he's running Syria foreign policy and said, Trump wants to get out of Syria by the end of the year. But you know what? We're in no rush. The problem is that these never-Trumpers are not sitting there and saying, I'm going to put the country first, I'm going to make the best president possible. They are changing policy. They are making the White House Bush again. That is what they're doing. They are ignoring the will of the American people. They're ignoring everything that Republican voters have sat there and said. And my frustration, as a Trump supporter, is I'm screaming, in my head over and over again. But the bigger frustration, if you're an American, is if all of these populist needs that Americans have been calling for the last 5, 6, 7 years are ignored with this president, it's not like they're going to go away. They're going to become more extreme. When pro-lifers lost the right to sit there and fight in the state legislature about abortion, they didn't sit there and say, oops, I guess we'll all be pro-choice now. No, some of them went and killed abortionists. If you ignore the will of a people for so long, it will become so extreme that we will be living in a country in 10 years where suicide bombing and domestic terrorism is a daily occurrence.
Well, I feel better. Thank you so much.
Ryan, always full of good cheer. Happy New Year.
But at the same time, this doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. But this White House.
But think about it, Ryan. But think about who can he trust? I mean, who would be good for Trump right now? It's a very short list.
Who?
No, that's nonsense. I can give you a dozen names. For Secretary of Labor, right now we have a person who supports mass low-skill labor. He should hire Peter Kirsanow, I think he's a professor somewhere. He's brilliant on labor issues. For DHS, why don't they hire Chris Kobach? He would be loyal.
Chris Kobach, I'm wondering why he doesn't have a position in the cabinet.
Because loyalty is not respected in this White House, and it's the biggest problem. And it goes back from the
that's his currency. That's all he expects. He doesn't even care if you're qualified for the job as long as you're loyal.
That's not true. That is not true. I'll give you a perfect example. There was General Kelly had a undersecretary named Joe Hagan. He was his chief of staff or second in command, deputy chief of staff, Joe Hagan. Joe Hagan was a monster, terrible, never-Trumper, and personally disrespectful, according to my sources, allegedly, personally disrespectful to Melania. I don't want to get sued, but personally, and Melania allegedly had it and said to Trump, he's out of here. So Hagan got fired. Then there were several people to sit there and say, who should we hire? One woman, can't remember her name, but she was a loyal MAGA, pro-Trump person, wanted the job. And then Joe Hagan had a friend who used to work for the Bush White House, who wanted the job. There was no follow-up. Who got the job? The former Bush person who hates Donald Trump. That's who replaced a person who hates Donald. That's the problem with this entire White House, is people who are good who are leaving are replaced by Bush people, and people who are bad who are leaving are replaced by Bush people. It's a never...
Just so I understand, Ryan, other than the Bushification, what is it that's being ignored in terms of the will of the people that you think the Trump election indicated?
Okay, so we spent 2 years now making sure that companies like Nike, who sell cultural Marxism to children with Colin Kaepernick. But we didn't get an immigration reduction. We didn't get a wall. We didn't stop the opioid crisis. They passed a bill.
Well, I'm gonna push back on the opiate thing. They've done a damn good job on that thing. That's reversing. That's moving.
They did something on it, which is thank God, because Rob Portman really, really worked on it. But nonetheless, They didn't do anything on foreign policy with it. Mexico is certainly not clamping down on it.
Not
the
yet.
State Department's on. Yeah, exactly. So they're not doing enough considering it's killing 48,000 people a year. If we see a child in Syria swimming across Italy, we have to open up Europe's borders. But if 50,000 Americans die of an opioid overdose, well, we'll take care of it next year. So we got nothing on immigration. Trade he's actually worked on because the entire Trade Department is actually Trump people. We have a State Department which is completely against him, a Justice Department that's completely against him, and I don't think that he knows he's the president. That's the most frustrating thing. He goes on Twitter like he's me, making social critiques, and he's the president.
Right.
And I don't think that he knows that sometimes.
Well, hold on. I like this construct because it makes me actually feel better. Maybe so. You think what would he need is in terms of his decorum would need to be adjusted, or does he really need to sort of own the office more? Which is it?
Well,
he needs mass firings. I just heard. Okay, I'm not going to say any names.
But Ryan, look who he put in these cabinet positions. These are people with absolutely no government experience. They were pals of his that he played golf with at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, these were.
Who did he put in? Who did he put in before that was pals with at Mar-a-Lago?
The guy who got the God. Now I'm gonna have to go to
energy. Was it
No.
the energy guy?
That was Rick. What's his face from Texas?
Okay,
right.
but yeah, that's from Perry, Rick Perry from Texas.
Perry,
but that's all besides the point. It's not. Listen, if it was just if he had brought in his maid from Trump Tower, I would feel more confident than Kirstjen Nielsen at DHS.
Oh, I like her. Come on now.
She's an abject idiot.
What?
She does not know
How dare you?
She is doing. She's an idiot. She doesn't know what she is doing. She helped create the border crisis when she made a statement saying that she wants migrants to go through the through the ports of entry, which caused a mass vacuum on it. But Kirstjen Nielsen has absolutely no qualifications to run her department. Her previous job was working on New Orleans rebuilding under Bush. She only got that job because she's quote-unquote personal close friends with John Kelly. And John Kelly, according to that the book, that recent book that came out about Trump, Kelly and the recent argument he had with Bolton, Kelly throws tantrums when people criticize Nielsen and threaten to fire
That's
her.
me. And I'm throwing a tantrum too.
That's Dr. Drew.
She's my pick. I got a crush on her.
Oh, she's horrendous. She's so bad.
Why?
I saw her at Trump Hotel, and I just honestly, I was like, don't yell at her. Just let her have dinner by herself. Don't be one of those people.
Here's why I love talking to Ryan Girdusky, though. There's all this weird
Because
Trump.
I hold back.
No, but you do for me the same thing that Ann Coulter does. There's all this Trump derangement syndrome where people are like, "Oh my God, Donald Trump." You have very specific issues with him, and that's something for discussion and examination. I get that.
Because here's the thing: there's a guy. I can't remember his name now. I'm not next to my computer, but there's a guy who ran for Congress in West Virginia's 3rd District. He lost as a Democrat, and he's running for president now. He's got a very strange last name, but he is running on a big pro-labor issue, and he's not sitting there and screaming, Trump's ending democracy or some absurd thing.
Right, the stupid stuff. Yeah. Dictator. Yes, he's a dictator. We had 100 million people vote, but democracy's over. Right.
Well, Ryan, I will say this, though. He does erode public trust in things like the press, in things like our intelligence agencies, when he's constantly calling them fake or phony or witch hunts or, that does a disservice to our democracy.
But don't they deserve to have questions and doubts? I mean, in the last 10 years of my lifetime, both the intelligence agencies and the media.
Yeah, you can have doubts, but you don't publicly say, I don't trust what they've come back with.
Ryan,
They did sit there and say that Iraqi weapons of mass destruction killed 500,000 Iraqis and 30,000 Americans were wounded, and they were completely
Well, that was the cabinet that said it. It wasn't intelligence agencies.
No, it was.
No, it was not their decision to go to war. Absolutely not.
Go to your corners, you guys. Go to your corners. Ryan, I want to keep you across the break here. Just hang on with me because this is good. We're going to pick this up right here, and I want your calls at 800-222-5222. Ryan Girdusky from Washington Examiner, Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Drew is Midday Live. It is Midday Live. Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Drew. We're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, contributor to the Washington Examiner, and before the break, Ryan and Lauren were mixing it up a little bit, particularly on Mr. Trump's rhetoric as it pertains to the press and the intelligence community. And I think Lauren has a particularly raw nerve when it comes to the press. So if you want to...
No, it's not just the press. It's the idea that he anyone who criticizes him is fake, is lying, all these people are lying. All these people that are now going to jail through the Mueller investigation are all liars, and they are lying. They're lying to federal prosecutors, which is why they're going to jail. But, there has to be some fire with all this smoke. Look how many people that were very close to the president are now in jail.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I get him, wanting him to sit there and hold himself more accountable. I understand that completely. But at the same exact time, we do live in a country with a horrible media at this point. Horrible. The Washington Post head op-ed from the Washington Post today is Tucker Carlson, neo-Nazi favorite. We have the leading op-ed of the Washington Post. And I've said this to people multiple times. The 2016 election, the media got it wrong through and through. Name a single journalist or opinion person who was fired because of it. Jennifer Rubin is still employed.
You don't get fired because of the results of an election.
Your job is to be a predictor.
No, they're not pollsters.
Everything. No, I'm not saying they're pollsters, but they're supposed to have, sorry about that. They're supposed to have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in politics. Not a single one was fired. Not a single person who sat there and said, Hillary has in the bag. Don't worry about it. Not a single person said, you know what, let's reconsider their contract.
Those are opinion people. They're never fired when they have a wrong opinion. Anyone who said that Trump was going to win was laughed out of the room, but they weren't fired. That's a ridiculous comparison. And that's not really what I'm talking about as far as the press.
90% of the journalists, yes, I understand what you're sitting there and saying, but we do have a terrible press. They do treat Trump terribly. The one thing that keeps Republicans coming back to Trump is the media. Is the media saying
that's true.
Not so?
I think that is true. Yeah, I think that and some of the things that fly out of those stories. I think that's true.
You have the media. Random stories. The day he came into office, they said that he removed the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. And there was I think it was a CNN reporter, and all he was doing was someone was standing in front of the bust, so he assumed it was taken out of the room, and he didn't walk to his left or to his right to make sure that it was still there. He just went with the story.
So, because of a story like that, you believe that he has the right to call the press the enemy of the people?
No, I wouldn't sit there and say that, and I don't use that terminology. I don't think that. I'm saying,
that's my whole point. That terminology is dangerous to democracy.
All right,
that's all.
I do think.
Last thought, Ryan. Last thought. Go ahead.
I do think the media does gin up a lot of things, racial tensions. We could sit there. I can go on time and time about titles and headlines that say Trump's a dictator. Trump's trying to put people in slavery. Those kinds of things happen constantly.
And I could name just as many headlines that say the same thing about Hillary during the campaign.
We're going to leave it right there, guys. Ryan, we'll look for you at the Washington Examiner. And
yes, read my new story about the woman Mary Kissel.
And follow you at Ryan Girdusky?
At Ryan Girdusky on Twitter. Thank you, Doctor. Right, Thank you, Laura.
You got it.
I'm always Laura. What the hell?
That is Lauren Savant. I am Dr. Drew. It is Midday Live. It is Midday Live. Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Drew at the top of the hour. We're going to speak to Assemblyman Jim Patterson. Right now, however, we're going to go out to Westwood One News contributor Jim Roop. The California court now has reversed a ruling against assisted suicide, so-called, this according to the Sacramento Bee. I wish they would stop the term assisted suicide. Jim, what are you seeing there?
Act is actually what it's called.
Say it again.
It's actually called the End of Life Option Act.
There you go.
Which is what it is.
Because the term suicide gets it all screwed up. That's not the point. The point is death with dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now it's back on the table. We don't know how long that's going to be, though, because there will most likely be challenges. What happened was, back in May, a Superior Court judge ruled it unconstitutional. However, he stayed his decision so that the state could appeal, and he based his unconstitutionality on the fact that it was enacted during a special session of the legislature that was convened for something else. It was health care reform, and according to some, they snuck this End-of-Life Option Act in there. So it was approved in not an appropriate way, according to some. Yeah. Well, some doctors brought this lawsuit to the court, and the court ruled. The Superior Court judge said, okay, it's unconstitutional. It got appealed by the state, and the appellate court, the 4th District Appellate Court in Riverside, the 3-judge panel there, ruled that they didn't rule on the constitutionality of it. They just said, well, the doctors who brought this lawsuit, have no standing.
Right.
Because they're not affected by it. They can choose to assist or not. So there's no harm there. They won't be sanctioned if they don't.
What does that mean? How are they not affected by it if they can choose
to
participate or not?
Basically, if a doctor says, I don't want to help this person end their life, the doctor won't be... Yeah, they don't have to. The doctor won't be sanctioned for it.
I see.
For refusing to provide medical care. So the judge, the appellate court said, well, you don't have any standing. It's not a lawsuit. You're not affected by it. So you don't have a right to block the law or to sue to block the law. So that overturns the lower court's ruling, however, not necessarily on the constitutionality. They didn't rule on whether it was hinky in the way it was enacted. So that's why it'll probably, and it's gone down back to the Superior Court. The judge says, I'm going to let the Superior Court judge deal with whether it can be refiled or not. Because in the ruling also, it suggests to the prosecutors, if you want to retry, if you want to give this another shot, you're going to have to rewrite it. You're going to have another strategy. And if you do, then possibly it will come back. So most likely it will be refiled in the Superior Court level. It will be challenged again, and it will be a long road to the U.S. Supreme Court is most likely where this will go. But for right now, this very second, and there are many people who have been waiting for this, they have the option now to get it done, if you will.
And if they refile, does it get put on a hold again?
Well, it depends on where it goes. While it's in the court process, the judge could stay and say, well, we're not going to do anything with this until we figure this out. So once it's refiled, they could ask for a temporary restraining order, the prosecutors or whoever files the case on whoever's behalf, and then that means it's on hold again. So, but right now that hasn't been done. This ruling came down sometime yesterday. There has not, at least we haven't heard of any refiling or any challenge to the appellate court's ruling, but that's kind of the halfway spot, really. It most likely will continue to be challenged until there is a final word by the U.S. Supreme Court.
I have really three questions. A, did Oregon have to go through all this?
Yes.
They did.
If you remember,
it seemed like it happened a lot quicker up there.
Yeah, we weren't really watching it that much.
Yeah.
Right. We just heard about when it did happen.
Exactly. So, yeah, they had the same process to go through, which you would think then any other state, based on Oregon's outcome, you would think any other state who enacts such a law would have an easier time.
Would be prepared, at least, for whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing is, do you remember the woman that was championing this? She was a former, I think, LAPD officer. She had lung cancer. And,
right.
Oh, it was such a heartbreaking story. I think she finally got the benefits of this, if I remember right. Is that true?
She did, but a lot of people are talking about the Brittany Maynard
Right.
Yes.
Who had to flee to Oregon.
In fact, when this was being heard, 2015, when the legislature was considering this, her portrait was sitting on their desk.
Oh, wow.
So regardless. Right.
My last question is, who are these physicians that are filing this, and what are they up to? Well, I can't imagine my peers doing that. It just seems bizarre to me.
I forgot the name of the coalition or the name of the group of physicians.
Is it a religiously based thing, like sanctity of life stuff?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those things. This
is somebody who's going to die. It's going to happen in a day or in 3 hours, and you can make that dignified and comfortable. Oh my God!
Here it is. It's the Life Legal Defense Foundation. Sorry, Life Legal Defense Foundation. Those are the folks. Those are the doctors who have gotten together for that. So,
all right, Jim. Well, we appreciate it as always. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, that is Jim Roop, Westwood One News contributor. We were taking your calls after the break at 800-222-5222. Do you see any issue with the? Let's not call it assisted suicide. Let's call it what it is, which is death with dignity, the ability to treat death, to treat the process of dying rather than to allow people to suffer. Think about what we do with animals. We would never do this to animals.
Of course
never.
Not. We always.
800-222-5222. It's Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Drew. It is Midday Live. Dr. Drew, it is Midday Live on Talk Radio and 800-222-5222. And this is Tina. Tina, go ahead there.
Hi.
Hi, Tina.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, I just wanted to share my story. My father recently used the End of Life Option Act on September 6th.
Where was he?
Was this prior to the stay on all this?
Yeah, well, I didn't know there was a recent stay, but in June there was a stay for, I think, 15 days, and then it was allowed again.
Uh-huh.
he went to the hospital. He found out he had to have an amputation, which he declined. So he was just going to have to wait for his leg to rot. So this was, in such a horrible experience, it was so amazing. He was at the VA, and they don't allow it there. So the day of, we took him to a hospice house in San Mateo, and it was like a living funeral. It was amazing, but so horrible, but such a, we went outside, they had a ceremony, he had his last cigar, we went back inside, the whole family was together, the doctors were there, we had a prayer, and then he drank the medication, and he was asleep within 2 minutes and passed within 2 hours.
Yeah.
The alternative would have been, couple
watching
months
him suffer.
The alternative would have been gruesome. The alternative would have been him gasping for air and in fevers and encephalopathic and even possibly breathing machines and ICUs, depending on the level of comfort that the various facilities have with letting somebody die of a medical illness. It's just crazy. So thank you for that story, Tina. I know it's emotional. And
it is. Sorry about that.
But here's what I like. Your dad was in command of his life and his death. That's perfectly fine, right?
Yep, he was in control, yep.
Thanks, Tina. Appreciate it. 800-222-5222, and this is Jim. Jim, go ahead there.
Yeah, Doc, listen, here's my deal. Both of my parents are bedridden and are in their 90s. And they both have full-time caretakers and all that. Neither one of them can walk. The only thing, when they do get out of bed, they're lifted out by one of those mechanical devices and then, pushed around in a wheelchair for a little bit or something. If they have to go to the doctor for some reason, same thing. But here's the both
Jim?
of them are Roman. Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry.
Keep going. We were sorry to lose you there. Go ahead.
Okay, both of them are Roman Catholics, and my mother prays every day that God takes her and she goes to heaven. I wondered what's their deal with the Roman Catholic Church now, as far as are they going to start opening up to this way of thinking, or do you know anything about this?
I don't know, but Jim, and I'm an advocate of, again, death with dignity. I would not be super comfortable with your parents taking advantage of this because it's a little different. We have not yet come to terms with the disease of aging as necessarily.
But when you have zero quality of life like that?
I understand. I get what you're saying. I'm just, it's different when you can say, hey, this person's going to be dead within a few days and we're going to make this comfortable. That's really what it's designed for, as opposed to, Jim, and I would even use your mom's language, God has not determined that this person's going to die yet. And we don't really know it's going to be a week, a year, or 3 years, and so that's doctors playing God then if we start to do that. Now,
I got you there, Doc. But here's my question. I understand what you're saying, but this is more my question here is, do you think the Catholic, because they won't do anything against the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
So my point is this, do you think that the Catholic Church will be receptive to this?
I don't think so, because they have a position of the sanctity of life above all else. And what I don't understand, Jim, about that logic is if you follow that logic to its conclusion, every person who is dying should be put on a ventilator and prevented from dying, and every coin and every dollar from every pocketbook should be spent keeping people miserable and sustained on life support indefinitely if it means that the life can be preserved. And trust me, we can do that. We can do that. Thank God we don't, because that is insanely miserable and makes no sense whatsoever. So the logic is a bit flawed. So I don't know, Jim, to tell you the truth. Thank you for the calls. 800-222-5222. It's Lawrence Vaughn and Dr. Drew on Midday Live. Lawrence Vaughn, Dr. Midday Lab. We were talking about the death with dignity, and before the break, we were taking your calls, and this is Pete. Pete, go ahead.
Oh, yes, thanks. I just wanted to tell you my story. My wife, 3 years ago, she died of a brain disorder, very rare, progressive supranuclear palsy.
Oh, boy.
And
you know who had that was, the guy, the piano player that played Arthur.
Yeah. Right.
It's also
Dudley
called
Moore.
progressive Dudley Moore died of this. Also called progressive supranuclear ophthalmoplegia. Yeah.
So anyway, it just takes away your functions a little bit at a time.
Yeah, it's awful.
And if you're typical, which my wife wasn't, you end up in bed, a vegetable for the last year, and then you die.
Yeah.
Well, she was in such good shape that she avoided all that. But at the end, it taken away most of her functions. She had already told the doctor that she didn't want to have a feeding tube. She didn't want to be, artificially kept alive. And then essentially she just stopped eating, stopped drinking, and she died. Probably self-induced. That's okay. Oh. But right after she died, within a week, is when Jerry Brown, the governor, had to make his decision to whether he was going to sign or not.
Yeah.
To implement this. And I wrote to him and I told him my story. And I'm glad he did it. And I think, the Catholic Church can believe whatever they want.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, and Catholics themselves can believe whatever they want, too.
If you're not for it, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't go around and tell other people what to do.
As you find out, you've not seen deaths like that. I've seen thousands. And you don't have to see too many to get the sense of what ought to be done, right?
You don't even have to see that. I mean, you just have to be a compassionate person.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pete.
We do it for animals. I don't understand why we would put humans through it.
Thanks, Pete.
You're welcome.
You got it. Let's go on out to Pam. Pam, go ahead. Pam.
Yeah, hi. It makes me sad to hear the stories. This is my story. My husband 3 years ago was diagnosed in November with brain cancer with basically no symptoms, kind of a little bit of symptoms starting in October. Once he got the diagnosis, we realized it started to immediately happen pretty quick. By the end of December or November, he started losing his ability to walk and lost his vision on his right side and his right eye. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the short version of it is that he looked into options for assisted suicide and kind of came up with nothing. At least here in California for us at the time. This has been 3 years. So he attempted to take his own life, and he was so weak that when he tried to do that, he ended up surviving that attempt.
Oh, boy.
And was actually sent home from the hospital from ICU, from a trauma unit, which they said they'd never, ever send anybody home, in a neck brace. And suffered in that for a few days and told me he was done, and we called in hospice, and we allowed him
Hospice can usually help you sort of navigate these waters. I know they, too, thanks, Pam, that they, too, would like sort of a broader range of treatments at their disposal, of course, because there's times when you get stuck and the suffering continues in spite of your best efforts. And if we just had this law, just expand the range of services that we could offer for death with dignity as we allow every other mammal on Earth if we have control.